we're wasting money. We're wasting the public's money on investments in more CO2 emissions instead of putting the public's money in something that will actually get us on a road to reducing emissions and getting to net zero.
The carbon capture is one part of a much bigger plan. We know that the future is going to be very different from what it is today, but we can do some things now to start reducing that carbon footprint.
It's like if someone told you to clean your house, and you just took all of this stuff in your home and just packed it into one room and just hope that no one opens the door or sees that. Eventually, it's going to spill out into your house. There's only so much you can pack and you can hide. And you still have not removed the problem. You've just hidden it to a certain extent.
Louisiana is the 31st smallest state. It's the 25th least populated. But despite all of that, it has one of the highest carbon footprints in the country. It's a home for oil and gas refineries, petrochemical plants, and other heavy industry, and is responsible for 4 to 5% of emissions for the entire United States. Yet under Governor John Bel Edwards, the state has created a plan that is aimed at achieving net zero carbon emissions.
The Governor's Climate Initiative Task Force came out with a plan that has 28 strategies, 84 different action items, 3 main focuses. Carbon capture is a piece of that.
That plan, which passed a 23-person task force unanimously, was designed to get the state's emissions to net zero in the next 30 years.
We know that the future is going to be very different from what it is today, but we can do some things now to start reducing that carbon footprint.
As it stands now, the current plan calls for and relies on a major investment in technology known as carbon capture and sequestration. And it's that aspect that has environmentalists concerned.
These are fossil fuel technologies. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the world's collected experts on climate science and climate change, are saying we have to have no new fossil fuel development.
Louisiana-based environmental reporter Sarah Sneath has been covering the issue of carbon capture along with the skepticism surrounding it.
Carbon capture on its surface sounds great, right? That you would put some sort of device on top of industrial facilities that would capture the carbon, and we're only talking about carbon emissions, and then it would take those emissions and pump them underground. And that would allow us to continue to burn the same amount of fossil fuels, but we could not have the emissions that are associated with that, and those emissions drive climate change. So it sounds wonderful, but the technology itself hasn't really worked out that way.
Also known as CCS, carbon capture and sequestration takes carbon molecules out of emissions, and it then stores them in underground caverns. However, that process is expensive.
Basically, the technology that you put on top of the industrial facility, like the smokestack, that takes a lot of energy to run. And so that adds a lot of cost to it, as does the method of taking from that facility and pumping it into, sequestering it underground in some way, putting it through a pipeline and putting it underground. That also costs money.
And the technology required has never actually really been tested at scale, partly because of the cost, something that even the state has admitted.
You really haven't seen large-scale operations of carbon sequestration. It's been something that's been talked about. You've had some pilot projects here and there, but as far as large-scale, it just hasn't been the case.
And so we're just seeing just a long line of these experimentations with carbon capture and storage that just haven't worked.
In recent years, several attempts using this technology have been started and shut down. In 2017, a Petronova plant in Texas said that it would capture 90% of its emissions. A few years later, due to ballooning costs, it shut the project down, having only captured 7%. In the newsroom, I'm Daniel Phillips for KATC TV3.